The night was a dish of ink tipped over the horizon when the first stories of the night blossom drifted into children's ears. They were hushed tales told around brazier fires, of a single tree standing alone on the wind-carved plateau of Mount Rithil, its bark darker than midnight, its leaves the color of tarnished silver. Many listeners adored the flourish of magic that ended every telling, the flowers that would glow like scattered stars only when two enemies, true enemies, clasped hands beneath its boughs and spoke forgiveness. If no reconciliation came, the tree stayed barren, year after patient year. Some doubters insisted that the whole thing was Bard's fancy. Others, quieter and perhaps wiser, carried the legend in their chests like a wordless prayer, hoping the tale was more than myth because the realm of Hevrin sorely needed such miracles. Among the hopeful was Brother Iran of the Stone Abbey, an unassuming monk whose face had been shaped by equal measures of sun, wind, and smiling. For 3 decades he had travelled from hamlet to fortress, collecting accounts of the night blossom, stitching half-remembered verses and crumbling manuscripts into something like a map. And while he laboured, the valley kingdoms flanking Mount Rithil slipped toward ruin. What began as disputes about grazing borders between the river folk of Brevant and the sea-born houses of Ardal grew into blood-red feuds, poisoned wells, midnight raids, and children who never returned from berry gathering. Brother Iran had seen enough open graves to know that summoning armies of priests and kings would not mend matters. Hatred had seeped so deep it ignored decrees. Yet he believed that if a single river folk and a single sea-born could forgive one another in the hush of the mountain, the impossible might bloom and the realm might follow. So he walked, dust clouding his sandals, and delivered an invitation wrapped in legend to both sides. He spoke first to old Lord Caspin of Brevant, whose younger son had been speared on a rocky shore. "Send someone you trust," Iran urged. "Someone with a heart broken enough to understand what healing is worth." Then he visited Matriarch Lyra of Ardal, whose daughter's wedding barge had been set aflame on the river mouth 2 summers past. He offered her the same words. The leaders, hardened and hoary, wanted victory more than peace. Even so, something in the monk's voice, soft, stubborn, and strangely bright, made them hesitate before ordering his arrest. Perhaps each wondered in the midnight chambers of their souls whether a sliver of magic was cheaper than another decade of coffins. From Brevant they chose Jalen, a smith's apprentice with soot-black hair and muscles tempered by bellows heat. He had witnessed his brother's body pulled from the river weeds, throat neatly cut. Since that day, Jalen had sworn to hate every sea-born until the rivers ran empty. From Ardal they selected Mayera, a fisher captain's daughter who carried a curved knife, and the scars of shackles on her wrists, spoils of a raid that had cost her twin her left hand. Commanders on both sides believed they were sending assassins with pious faces. Let Jalen ensure the seaborn died on the trail, let Mayra do the same for the river folk, and blame fate. Either way, vengeance would be served. Neither emissary knew of the other until they reached the Pilgrim Road, a pale ribbon threading the foothills. Late on the second day, the horizon split with summer lightning, and the wind rolled downhill smelling of iron and rain. Travellers ahead scattered for caves, but Jalen spotted a lone shape struggling to untangle a mule's reins from thorny scrub. He urged his own mare forward, intending to speed past, yet the mule bucked and sent its owner tumbling. Whether by instinct or reflex, he never untangled. He leapt down and caught the woman's shoulder before she cracked her skull on a stone. Only after the rescue did he see the salt blue tattoo of Ardal curling along her collarbone like a wave crest. Myra shoved him off. "Touch me again and lose the hand," she hissed, yanking free a blade as silver as stormlight. Jalen's jaw knotted. "Try me, sea rat." Lightning spidered across the sky and thunder clapped loud enough to erase conversation. They might have traded blood right there if a sheet of rain had not hammered the hillside and turned the red soil into syrup. Survival made forced allies. The only shelter nearby was a crumbling watchtower from the empire that had died 500 years earlier. They dragged their animals inside, barred the warped door, and found themselves sharing a dust-thick corner over flickering lantern flame, the bones of ancient wars around them. Neither wanted to speak, but silence inside a storm hummed like a kettle near boiling. Myra broke first. "You saved me out there. Why?" "Reflex," Jalen muttered. She barked a laugh. "A reflex of mercy in a river folk? Impossible." "And yet," he said, gesturing at her unbroken skull. "That remains to be proven." She poked the air with her knife. "Name, rank, sin?" "Jalaine of Brevant." "No rank, plenty of sin. Yours?" "Captain Mayer Ardell, master of the tide and the night net, sworn enemy of every reed-eater from your mud-puddle kingdom." "Pleasure." He spat the word like sand. When the thunder slackened to distant growls, they slept in turns, backs pressed against opposite walls, weapons within arm's reach. Dawn pierced the tower slits, pale and cold. Outside, the road had become a river of sludge. Their mounts limped. Supplies had soaked. Map ink bled beyond recognition. Neither could reach the mountain without the other. 2 mules could haul both packs. 2 scouts could double their chance of spotting ambushes. They recognized the practical truth at almost the same instant, and despised it in equal measure. "Truce until our paths part," Myra proposed. "Truce," Jalen agreed, though he could taste rust on the word. For 6 days they climbed the mountain's flank, weaving through bristlecone forests where the wind sang like glass. At night they quarreled about everything from saddle knots to philosophic etymology of forgiveness. Jalen swore the river folk had been victims first. Myra answered with a ledger of atrocities measured in burned nets and orphaned docks. The argument became an ember they kept kicking between them lest it cool and leave them staring at the inconvenient shape of their companion's humanity. Yet despite every self-reminder to hate, small fissures in contempt appeared. Myra's unguarded smile when Jalen handed her a strip of jerky seasoned the Ardell way with coriander. Myra's low whistle of admiration when Myra, standing on a precipice, read the bend of storm clouds like sheet music and guided them to safer ledges. On the 7th morning they reached the plateau. It unfurled beneath the sky like a ragged flag, empty save for a single tree perched alone on a rise. From a distance it looked half dead, limbs contorted into black question marks. No blossoms shimmered in its crown. Even the air felt suspended, as if the winds themselves held breath. Jalen's pulse drummed. So the stories were true. True enough. Myra chewed her lip. Now what? He glanced sideways. We stand beneath it, say some sorry words, watch it bloom, and go home heroes. Just like that? Well, simpler than another decade of raids. Myra inhaled until her ribs shuddered. Simple was yesterday, river boy. Today requires something else. They approached the tree carefully, as though it might bolt. Up close, the bark shimmered with faint iridescence, like moonstone hidden under soot. Halved at the trunk's base were dozens of shallow knife marks. Names, perhaps, or failed attempts. Jalen reached to trace one and felt a sudden chill slither up his arm into his skull. Visions flared, 2 armored warriors circling each other by starlight, blades wet, crying out apologies that came too late. The image cracked apart and was gone. Jalen staggered back. "The tree remembers," Myra whispered. Her face had paled. Apparently she'd seen her own spectre. "It drinks the sorrow of the land. Then let's end its thirst," Jalen said, steadier than he felt. They stood beneath the canopy. A few lone leaves clinked against one another like dull coins. The world waited, yet the words would not come. Jalen felt his throat pinch, as if the ghost fingers of his dead brother pressed there. He had nurtured hate like a forge fire, shaping it into armor. Could he unmake it with a sentence? Myra clenched the pommel of her curved knife, knuckles bone white. Forgiveness, she once swore, belonged to poets, not warriors. Her stolen nights in riverfolk prisons, the way they had laughed while shackling her wrists, that memory was her spine. Remove it and she might collapse. Minutes passed, then hours measured by the scud of clouds. Nothing bloomed. Afternoon light bruised into violet dusk. Disappointment tasted metallic. Jalen kicked a stone off the rise. Perhaps the legend is rotted like everything else. Myera wiped angry tears before they fell. Or perhaps we are too broken to speak the one thing that feeds this tree. They built a fire near the roots and ate hardtack in silence. Stars prickled overhead. The wind's chill tunneled into bone. Around midnight, Brother Iron arrived. Neither had heard his approach, yet there he stood, robes brushing ankle-deep grass. "How did—" Jalen began. "The mountain yields paths to those it invites," Iron said, as if that sufficed. He knelt by the fire, warming wrinkled hands. "I expected I might find you both here." Myera scowled. "We tried, monk. The tree doesn't care." Iron studied them, eyes reflecting flame. "You tried words. The tree listens deeper." He gestured for them to rise. They followed him to the trunk. The night air quivered, thick with unspoken things. "Open your memories," Huron instructed. "Not the rehearsed stories. The true ones, tender and ugly." Jalen felt the ground tilt, memories unspooled, his brother Derek laughing on the riverbank, then Derek's body pale against the mud. The sea-born barbed arrow lodged near his heart. Rage had flooded Jalen so thoroughly that for a year afterwards he could taste metal in every meal. He had dreamed of drowning sea-born prisoners, of burning boats to the waterline. Yet, in each dream, Derek's face never smiled. It looked ashamed. Myera's memories surfaced too, moonlit water trembling as she was dragged in nets up a riverfolk garrison dock, soldiers jeering at her foreign curses, the weight of her twin's severed hand in a blood-soaked cloth, her own pledge carved on the inside of her thigh with a fishhook. No mercy, no surrender. But other memories rose as well. A night she had spared a riverfolk child drifting on debris after a skirmish, towing him to shore before vanishing. The child's sob of thanks had haunted her since, proof that mercy could exist, and proof she had denied. The visions pooled between them, visible somehow in the starlight like shifting watercolor smoke. Myera felt the scorch of Jalen's grief like sunburn. Tears blurred both their gazes until enemy and self were indistinct. Hiron's voice came soft. "Will you stay prisoners of those memories, or will you sift them for what might yet live?" Jalen swallowed shards of pride. He faced Myera. "I am sorry for what my people did to you, to your family. Sorry for the laughter in the chains. I was not there, yet the hate that fueled them lived in me too, unchallenged." "I release it." The words trembled but did not break. Myera's shoulders shivered, either from cold or from something loosening inside. "I am sorry for the arrow that felled your brother. Sorry for every villager I saw only as a target. I carried my vengeance like a torch and thought the flames lighted my way. In truth, they blinded me." She sucked a shaky breath. "I release it." They stood, eye to eye. Forgiveness had been shaped by tongues to sound like mercy granted from on high, but in that moment, it felt more like tearing free of chains they themselves had welded. Each extended a hand simultaneously, surprised, almost laughing at the awkwardness. Their palms met, rough with callous, but warm. Something changed. From the branches above, a single petal drifted, glowing faintly blue like glacier ice. It settled on Jalen's wrist, leaving a luminescent kiss. Another petal followed, then a dozen. The boughs rustled, and buds that had hidden, dormant, ignited one by one. Blooms unfolded in hushes of silver-white fire, painting the plateau in a gentle aurora. The night blossom had awakened, not as a sudden explosion, but as a gradual inhalation of light, until every branch glittered with constellations. Myra laughed, a bright, astonished sound. Jalen felt weightless. Wind circled the tree, lifting petals into spirals that touched their hair, their cheeks, then whirled outward across the plateau as if scattering seeds of reconciliation into the wide world. Brother Iran watched, tears shining in his beard. "The realm will feel this," he murmured. "Hatred may not vanish tomorrow, but it just lost its crown." Petals pulsed brighter, then dimmed to a steady glow like lanterns ready for journeying. Mayera and Jaelam remained beneath the canopy till dawn, painted the mountains peach and rose. With daylight, the blossoms turned pale grey, still beautiful but no longer luminous, as though their true work thrived best in darkness. They debated what next. If they returned alone, their leaders might claim the miracle of fabrication. If they returned together, some faction would surely cry treachery and assassinate them before midnight bells. Then Mayera thought of the petals swirling across the winds. "Let the realm come to the mountain," she said. "Let everyone see where forgiveness blooms." Brother Irene nodded. "I will carry word. I have spent my life as messenger. Today the message finally carries me." In the afternoon they carved new marks in the bark, not names, but a single symbol. 2 intersecting waves, one rivergreen, one cebu, encircled by a blossom. They sheathed their weapons, not knowing if they would need them again, but unwilling to grip them with former fury. Together they built cairns to guide future pilgrims, and left a satchel of supplies for those who would follow more desperately than they had. When dusk breathed gold on the plateau, Mayera and Jalen sat against the trunk. They did not talk. Words felt clumsy compared to wind in fresh leaves. What flowed between them was not friendship, not yet, but something older, a recognition that the same arteries of blood and fear and hope ran through enemy flesh. Forgiveness had not healed every wound. Scars remained. But scars, like tree rings, could be read as records of survival. That night, lanterns bobbed on the foothill trails, scores of them, maybe hundreds. As rumours travelled ahead of Brother Iron's swift feet, people came bearing griefs older than their grandparents. Some arrived tight-fisted, itching to find fraud, swords rattling. Others crawled half-dead from wars they no longer remembered starting. All beheld the pale blossoms glowing under the moon and fell silent. Jalen and Mayera welcomed them with water and blankets, instructing no one in what to do, only pointing toward the tree. They watched as strangers, rivals, sometimes even lovers, torn apart by faction, stood beneath the branches and fumbled toward words of remorse. Not every attempt succeeded, but each failure fertilized the soil of the next. Petals drifted like snow until the plateau seemed cut from winter stars. Days turned to weeks, messengers carried tales to distant thrones, armistices sprouted in unlikely places. The price of swords dwindled at the forges. Some lords despised the change, for peace threatened their wealth, but common folk clung to it the way the parched cling to rain. One grey dawn, as Mayera patched a pilgrim's torn boot and Jalan stirred porridge, the monk Iran approached, smiling. "The mountain will not keep you forever," he said. "You gave it what it asked. Now the valley needs you." "To do what?" Mayera asked. "Live," he replied. "Show them enemies can share bread without measuring poison first." Jalen and Mayre exchanged a glance. The notion of returning to riverbanks and seashores felt terrifying and strangely simple. They packed light. At the tree they paused, laying fingers against bark that felt warmer than it once had. Jalen whispered thanks. Mayre kissed a low-hanging bloom. They walked down opposite paths at first, each toward home. But before the curve of the ridge could divide them, Mayarea called, "River boy!" He turned. When the sea meets the river, there's a place called the Tangle where currents wrestle before they learn to dance. Someday soon the village there will hold a feast of new beginnings. Will you come? Jalen smiled, an unarmored smile that revealed the child he might have been without war. "Send me word, and I'll bring the best iron pot my forge can make. We'll cook peace into the stew." They parted, lighter than they came. Behind them, the night blossom shimmered, petals shifting like embers of a long night's fire, promising that as long as forgiveness could be found beneath its branches, darkness would never be wholly dark again.